Hello everyone, Books with Banks back again with another video. This one will be pretty quick today. I've been thinking and tossing around this idea of what would a more kind of critical perspectives, scholarly, academic kind of book analyzing Erikson's Malazan Book of the Fallen and Esselmont's novels of the Malazan Empire. What would a more academic book like that actually look like? What might the breakdown be? So just for fun, just a quick thought experiment, I just typed out kind of the chapter breakdown, what I would be excited to see if all of a sudden one day I went to a bookstore and I saw something like this on the shelf. Before I get too far along though, if you haven't already, it would mean a lot if you could please like and subscribe. Thank you so much. Okay, so first things first, the title could be something along the lines of critical explorations into the greater Malazan series, the greater Malazan universe, collection of Malazan series and sub-series, something like that. Then I think it would be fun if the introduction could be written by either of the authors, by Mr. Erikson or Mr. Esselmont. Yeah, I'm sure either would write a wonderful introduction to a book about their own works. I'm not sure if they'd be comfortable doing that. I also think, of course, 8P on YouTube, A Critical Dragon, I think he could do a wonderful introduction to this book as well. And then, kind of on the opposite end, the conclusion could be written by the same person, but just for fun, let's imagine the introduction's written by Steven Erikson, the conclusion's written by Ian C. Esselmont. I think that would be really lovely. Maybe a bit of a dream. But then, between all that, what would kind of the meat of this book be? Kind of envisioning 10 chapters or so. So, I think chapter 1 should be, or could be, something like origins of the series, Erikson and Esselmont, and role-playing games, and just kind of a history, basically, of how this world was developed through their gaming, through their friendship, even early stuff with like their screenplay drafts and things like that in the 90s, what Gardens of the Moon looked like originally. Maybe there could be some cool like images or like photo scans of old maps, things like that. I don't know. That's kind of what I'm thinking for chapter 1. Just how did this world come to be? Then chapter 2, I think, should be something addressing the trials, advantages, and disadvantages of writing a massive series. Because I think no matter what, anyone looking to read a new fantasy book, if they look at Malazan, or if someone suggests Malazan to them, one of the very first things anyone's going to notice and anyone's going to consider constructing their TBR or whatever is just how many freaking books there are. I mean, if we're just talking about Erikson stuff, or if we're talking about everything, it's a ton of books. Most of them are massive, and I think a chapter kind of exploring all the pitfalls, and I think a chapter exploring all the advantages and disadvantages of writing such a series would be fun to have early in a book like this, if, say, someone's coming to this never having read these books. They're coming to this book without the context of what happens in these books in Malazan, and they're wondering if they should try it for themselves. I think that's why it would be nice to have a chapter like this a little bit earlier on. So that's 2 chapters. 1 chapter, origin of the series. 2nd chapter, advantages and disadvantages of making it so darn long. Chapter 3, I think maybe we could dive right in then, tackle one of the bigger themes or bigger ideas of the series, compassion. And we can look at all the ways the characters that support, or the characters' different perspectives on the idea of compassion, where it pops up in Book of the Fallen, where it might pop up in some of the other series, the prequels, and so on. Yeah, I think it would be fun. I mean, it's such a buzzword with the series. Everyone that talks about Malazan on BookTube pretty much knows you're gonna hear somebody in the comments talk about compassion, or somebody asks on Reddit, what's the series about? Someone's gonna write compassion. So it would be fun to have chapter 3 all about compassion in Malazan. Then chapter 4, I was thinking, could be something addressing the variety of characters in this world. There's so many wonderful characters, rich characters, and I think it would be really fun to have a chapter exploring their personalities, their interactions, and I also think it would be fun to include something in this chapter about how each author might write the same character, slight differences. Those sorts of things could be a lot of fun. And I think it would be fun to have this chapter somewhere in the book. Doesn't necessarily have to be chapter 4, but a chapter just broadly addressing the characters I think would be wonderful. Then chapter 5, I think should be specifically about Ian C. Esselman's novels of the Malazan Empire and kind of the reception of those books, critical reception, fans' interest in those books, and the impact of those on the broader series. I do think that a lot of the times, unfortunately, Esselman's contributions get buried a little bit in the conversation about Malazan. So having a whole chapter dedicated to his kind of main 6-book series, I think would be really interesting. And yeah, I think those books deserve as much conversation as Malazan Book of the Fallen, and this chapter could kind of not only talk about just the content of those books, but also talk about I guess the differences in how fans feel about Book of the Fallen versus novels of the Malazan Empire. So yeah, chapter 5, I think is probably a good place for something like that. Then chapter 6, kind of along the lines of the character chapter, these could fall wherever. I think we could do a chapter all about magic, religion, and the gods. Yeah, I think this would be a lot of fun. A lot of times people go into these books a little bit confused about how the magic works, who's god, which religion serves which gods, who's all in such and such a house of ascendants and gods and all this stuff, what thrones are there. I think a chapter about magic, religion, and the gods could explain some of these things, but also explore how both authors kind of approach these bigger ideas. And then chapter 7 maybe could be ancient history and the races of this world. So where maybe we've talked all about religion and gods, and maybe we've talked all about characters, but this could be a fun place to talk about the Kalana Mass, the Jagged, the Forkal Assail, the Kachain Shamal, not only how those different elder races interact with each other, but also the creation of those peoples, why the authors wanted their cultures to operate in certain ways and to clash in certain ways. Yeah, I think that's an essential chapter that needs to be here. Then chapter 8, maybe just fan versus critical reception in academic and social circles. Here we could talk about other things that have been written about Malazan Book of the Fallen and novels of the Malazan Empire. We could talk about just the YouTube kind of reaction to this series, and YouTube, Reddit, places like that. Yeah, I think a chapter should be dedicated to kind of the secondary research and like academic analysis work that's been done on this series, but also the social media kind of analysis and critical response to all of these books. Yeah. Then chapter 9, I think maybe could dive into the prequels and sequels, the other series outside of those two main series. So of course these are things like the Carcanis trilogy, the Witness trilogy, and Path to Ascendancy, all series of course that are ongoing, and yeah, a chapter dedicated to what those different new series are exploring, what they add to the world, what they clarify, or in some cases make a little bit more confusing about the world. Yeah, that could be chapter 9. And then last but not least, I think chapter 10 should be, as the last chapter, should be about endings and a convergence and an anticlimax, and how certain books go for a massive epic final showdown, big huge battle. Other ones don't necessarily show the battle or don't necessarily have the exact same battle that fans might be expecting to get at the end of the book. I think both authors approach the conclusions of their books, and they do some very creative and fun things with their endings. So having a whole chapter dedicated to how they conclude each of these novels, or some of these novels, I think would be a ton of fun. But yeah, then of course, then the conclusion written by whoever, someone closely tied to the series, no doubt, and then all the sources and everything. So yeah, that's just kind of a fun thought experiment of what a more academic analysis of Malazan book might look like. I had a lot of fun thinking through this, kind of breaking it down, and I hope you had a nice time listening to kind of how I would structure such a book. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Bye.